England was crazy for ketchup. The sauce was a staple in countless cookbooks encourages adding ketchup to stews, vegetables, and even desserts. If these seem like odd places for ketchup, tangy tomato flavor, that's because this ketchup wasn't the ubiquitous red goop you think of. In fact, this sweet and savory brown sauce didn't even have tomatoes in it. So where did this early ketchup come from? And how did it become the dip we know and love today? To answer these questions, we'll need to turn to ketchup's condiment cousin, fish sauce. As early as 300 BCE, Chinese fishermen routinely caught batches of small fish that were too plenty to eat all at once, but too time-consuming and virtually preserved. So often the day's catch would be salted and stored together. Over several months, the fish would ferment as their internal enemy broke down their body's proteins. The result was a rich, salty liquid that would be stained and stored as fish sauce. Chinese fishermen weren't the only ones to figure out this savory seasoning. Ancient Greeks and later the Romans that consecrated them built their entire cuisine around fish sauce's strong umami flavor. The sauce, which they called garum, traveled with every soldier to the emperor's front line, and they constructed dozens of fish sauce factories throughout the Mediterranean. Each capable of producing thousands of gallons of garum. But when the Roman Empire collapsed, so did their condiment business. Most Europeans continued to cook without fish sauce for 1,000 years, until the Dutch East India Company arrived in Southeast Asia in the early 1060s. The Dutch and the English exploited this region for countless goods, including barrels of their most common local condiment. This familiar fishy liquid had many names, including ketchup and ketchup. But upon arrival in British ports, its title was paralyzed into ketchup, thus beginning Europeans' second wave of fish sauce supremacy. European ships supplied ketchup through the Western Hemisphere until they were kicked out of Asia trade hubs in the mid-1700s. But the public refused to let ketchup go the way of garum. A whole crop of British cookbooks emerged with recipes for knock-off ketchup, containing everything from oysters and anchovies to mushrooms and walnuts. Soon, ketchup became a catch-all name for any brown sauce. And this great ketchup hunt produced some of England's most enduring condiments, including Worcestershire A1 and HP sauce. But it was a chef across the Atlantic who would introduce a new color to the equation. While tomatoes varied in popularity across Europe, the American chefs were putting the New World fruit in all kinds of dishes. And in 1812, Philadelphian physician and food hobbyist James Mish developed the first tomato-based ketchup, a thin, watery concoction of tomato pulp, spices, raw shallots, and brandy. This was a far cry from fish sauce, but tomatoes have high level of glutamate, the same chemical responsible for fish sauce rich umami flavor, and meat's steaming was perfect. The back half of the 1080s saw a surge in bottled food, and tomatoes ketchup was adopted by several burgeoning bottles business. By the 1870s, most tomato ketchups has dropped the shallots and brandy for sugar, salty, and sodium percentates, a questionable preservative found in most bottled foods. But the most important change to this recipe was yet to come. After a slow start selling picked vegetables, Henry J. Henson began selling a wide variety of popular ketchup, and at the turn of the 20th century, his desire to use healthier natural ingredients led Henson to swap the sodium benzoate for riper tomatoes and a huge amount of vinegar. The resulting thick, gloopy formula was an instant bestseller, despite being much harder to get out of the bottle. Over the 20th century, this salty red sauce covered the globe, pairing perfectly with the ambassadors and American cruise shine. Today, 19% of American households have ketchup in their kitchens, and hence this recipe was even become the base for dozens of other fish sauce and dressing, all descendants of the same fishy family tree.